good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bhavan's Nature and Adventure Center webinar series. The topic for today's session is insects and the amazing worlds of insect, which is going to be conducted by Mr. Pranath Patil, who is a naturalist working with Luxury Wildlife Lodge at Kanha Tiger Reserve in Madhya Pradesh. He is also a amateur wildlife photographer and loves to write about wildlife in his blogs. His articles have been published in several wildlife magazines and many wildlife related websites. I just want to tell you that sit back, enjoy the session, and if you have any questions, make sure you type it down in the chat box so that your questions will be answered at the end of the talk. Okay, over to you, Mr. Pranath.
Thank you so much, Pankaj, for that wonderful introduction. So we will start the session. I will request everyone at the start to keep your videos off and to mute your mics so that we don't use a lot of bandwidth and we don't get any breaks in the session. So as mentioned, the topic is insects. These are animals, these are creatures that are everywhere around us, be it in a forest, be it in a city. There are so many different types of insects that you just can't miss them. So exactly how many insects are there in this world? As of today, roughly about 1 million species of insects have been described, have been identified by scientists. But there is a guess, entomologists, people who study insects believe that there might be anywhere between 6 to 10 million species in this world. Every year, every month, new species are described. Deep from the Amazonian rainforests, and even sometimes places such as garbage dumps, people discover new species of insects. So they are everywhere. It is difficult to name everything. It is difficult to give an English name to everything and to identify each species. Some of them look so similar. So the talk that we are having is not going to revolve around their names, not going to revolve around the classification. I am going to share stories of insects which we find around us, just simply by looking around us, and just going to tell you how interesting these insects are. Things that we probably miss when we just look at them. A lot of people get scared of insects at first go, but hopefully at the end of this presentation, you will not be afraid of these wonderful creatures. So there are a lot of creepy crawlies around us. Some of them are insects, most of them are insects, but some of them are not. So what makes a creature, what makes a small creepy crawly an insect? Is first thing, as you can see in this drawing, there are 3 legs on one side of the body, and similarly there will be 3 legs on the other side. So an insect always has 6 legs. Many a times we count spiders as insects too, but spiders have 8 legs and they are not insects. So in this presentation, I'm not going to talk about spiders. Another fascinating thing about insects is you can see this is a drawing of a wasp, has 2 pairs of wings, 2 on this side and there'll be 2 more on the other side. Most of the insects in fact have wings. A lot of insects we just see crawling around like cockroaches. We think they cannot fly, but they will surprise you. Suddenly they open their wings and they start flying. Some other insects like ants don't have wings, but in their earlier stage of their adulthood, they do have wings. So most of the insects at some point of time in their life will have wings. Now all insects start their life in eggs, just like birds. So the mother, the female insect, will lay eggs, and these eggs actually come in many different shapes, colors. Most of them are tiny, but even in that tiny world, there is a lot of difference in sizes, and they can be of different weird shapes. This one, for example, it looks like matkas, matka kulfi that we eat on the streets. So they look like the small matkas. These belong to a type of bug, but all these eggs are not always round. These tiny white colored things that you see attached to the white threads, these are eggs of an insect called lacewing. Very pretty. So the female comes and she secretes this long thread from her body, and the egg is attached to the end. This probably does not allow some predators to reach the eggs. So it's a defense strategy for the lacewing. Now for many insects, when they come out, some of them, the first thing that they eat, the first meal that they have is their own eggshell. And there is no one to teach them. In insects, there is no parental care. The mother or the father is not with them. So when they come out, it's just an insect that they have, that I have to eat my own eggshell. This is a tiny caterpillar, a butterfly larva, and it has just come out of that long white bottle-like thing that you see. Just come out of that, and it has just started to chew on its own eggshell. As I said, this is a young one, a baby of a butterfly. It does not look anything like the butterfly. So with insects, during their whole life cycle, the whole complete from egg to adulthood, there are two different strategies. In case of butterflies or moths, what comes out from the egg is a larva on the left side of the screen, and the larva eats a lot, then makes a pupa, and from the pupa the adult comes out, which does not look anything like its baby, does not look like the larva. But on the right hand side, they also have, some of the insects have a strategy which is called incomplete metamorphosis or incomplete change, where from the egg a young insect comes out, like in the case of grasshoppers, and this young looks exactly like a smaller version of the adults. They might not have wings, but it's just a small replica. So they don't have a pupa, they don't undergo a drastic change in their life. Now, we have made use of this life cycle that some insects go through, and we have found products that are extremely useful for us. This is an image of the silkworm or the silk moth. So on the right hand side screen, the big white colored worm that we see, that is the caterpillar, what we call illi in Hindi, caterpillar of the silk moth. And on the left hand side, you can see the white colored moth, that is the adult. In between this phase for the caterpillar, from the caterpillar stage to go into the adult phase, makes this white colored case around itself, and it is made up of a thread. What we do is we collect this pupa and we remove the thread. That is how we get silk. And this has been figured out probably around 5,000 years ago. So we have been using insects for a really long time now. Since we're talking about moths, something really fascinating. Now, a lot of people might see this and think that this is a butterfly because it looks pretty, and many people think that moths are ugly. But this is a moth called moon moth or lunar moth, and it's found in Mumbai as well. What's fascinating about it is the male moth can actually smell the female from more than 11 kilometers away. They use their antenna to collect chemical signals that the female is releasing. But imagine, even if the male is 11 kilometers away, it can still pick up the scent of the female and come following it. If there are any kids joining, I would like to give you an example. Sometimes when you are sitting in your living room or your bedroom, you can smell what your mom is cooking. But that is only if you're in the house. Imagine now you are in your school and you can smell what your mom is cooking at your home. So that's how far these moths can smell each other from. They do this because as an adult, once they complete the caterpillar stage and they become an adult, they have a very, very short lifespan. These adult moths, the maximum lifespan would be about 6 or 7 days. So before they finish that, they have to find a mate and breed so that the female can lay eggs, and both of them after that die. They have no other function in their life. So they have amazing sense of smell, but some moths also have an amazing sense of hearing. They can hear sounds which we cannot hear at all. You can see this is an insectivorous bat, and it's trying to catch this moth. Now these insectivorous bats, they emit ultrasonic sounds, and when this ultrasonic sound waves hits a wall or hits something, it bounces back and the bats are able to hear them. We cannot hear these sounds. Even if we see these bats flying around, they are emitting the sound waves continuously. But for us, they are completely soundless. But these moths can pick up the sounds, and they know a bat is coming to hunt me, and these moths can get away from the bats as a result. Another fascinating insect, this one is called the water snider or the pond skater. Now imagine there are stories of Jesus being able to walk on water. Now that is something that happened probably thousands of years ago, but this insect is doing this every day in front of us. So water sniders are bugs, and they live on the surface of the water. Whatever debris fall from trees or from the atmosphere, they eat them. Uh, but they always keep on floating, they keep on moving on the water. Their weight, in fact, is so less that it's not enough to break the surface tension on top of the water, and they never sink down. So in this image, this insect is actually on water. All this that you see is the surface of a very calm pond, and the insect, wherever it is touching, you can see some ripples that are created, but otherwise this insect is completely comfortable on the surface of the water. Now, there are some more fascinating insects which actually can make their own light. If you're sitting in your home, suddenly in the night light goes out, it's completely dark. You will switch on your mobile torch, or you might light a candle, but imagine having the power to create your own light. Marvel movies are quite hit nowadays. So imagine you're Iron Man, you just raise your arm and there's a bulb that comes out from there. So these are called fireflies. And at the end of the abdomen, where you see the green light, these fireflies, they have a chemical reaction going on in their abdomen. Different sorts of chemicals mixing over there, and that's how they create this light. They are mostly active because of this light. They are only active in the night. But this light does not help them to see in the darkness. It's actually to communicate with each other. Males and females both keep on flashing these lights. That's how they are able to identify each other, and that's how males can find females. Females can select a male, and that is how they find each other to breed. Okay, now this is an insect which is very, very common even in a lot of cities. Wherever there's a little bit of greenery around you, you can see this insect. It's called a cicada, cicada, and some of the cicadas that we have on our planet, these are the loudest creatures in the world. They create the loudest sounds that any animal can produce. So I'm going to play the sound. It's a short audio clip that I've recorded. We'll quickly hear the sound and I'll continue after that. All right. I hope that was audible to everyone. If not, I'll play this again at the end of the presentation. So in these insects, in cicadas, what's interesting is only the males can make this sound. The females cannot produce any sound. The females are mute. And the males, they don't create this sound from their mouth. They create it by rubbing their belly scales. If you can see the cursor, I'm pointing out to the scales on the belly. They rub these against each other, and that is how the sound is produced. Now, some of these insects, as I mentioned, they are the loudest animals in the world. There are some cicadas, if you keep them very close to your ear when they are making this sound, we can actually go deaf. Sometimes for a little while, but sometimes it can be permanent as well. The sound waves are so sharp that they can actually rupture our eardrums. Moving on to the most fascinating creatures I think we see around us, ants. I'm sure everyone has seen ants in their at your houses, black ones or red ones. And many times they are walking in these lines. They are very quickly moving in opposite directions. That is when they are moving from their nests, they are moving from their colonies when they have found a food source somewhere. So all of them are traveling there, getting the food and getting it back to their nests. Now, how do they find their direction? How do they know which direction to go and if they are going in the correct direction or not? What these ants do, they're tiny creatures. They can't really see very far away, and in fact, their eyesight is very, very poor. But when they are walking, these insects, these ants, they actually leave a chemical trail on the ground, on the wall. And the ant behind, with her antenna, can smell these chemicals. So it knows. The moment it strays a little far away and does not get that same chemicals, that familiar chemical smell, it will move back and find the line. But as long as they are on that track, they don't get lost. You can try this. If you see a line of ants walking on your wall, just like wherever there's a gap, with your finger, vigorously rub that spot on the floor or on the wall. When the next ant reaches there, that chemical is gone, and it will for a little while not understand what to do. Then eventually another ant crosses, they meet and they understand, okay, this is the right direction. But because you have rubbed and they are not able to find that chemical trail, they get confused for a little while. Now, most of these ants that we find in our houses, they find a small gap in the walls or sometimes underground, and they make their nests over there. But there are some other very fascinating ants that don't make their nests underground. So this is a photo of a weaver ant. These are found in a lot of forests. In fact, even in Mumbai, if you go to Sanjay Gandhi National Park, they are there. In central India, if you come there, probably the most common species of ants over there. And what they do is, they are called weaver ants because they weave leaves together. So you can see all these worker ants, they are pulling this leaf and they are pulling the leaf from the bottom, and they'll weave it using a thread. Now this bottom right hand side image, you can see the ant has something in her mouth. That's actually a larva ant, and the larva creates silk. So these white threads, that is the silk that the larva are creating, and they use this silk to stitch, to weave the leaves together. Now we weave our clothes, but these ants probably have been around for from 200 million years before we came, and they have discovered the art of weaving so long back. So in fact, whatever we are doing, we are just copying, we are just imitating nature in some way or the other. Now this is an insect that I think everyone knows. Probably many of you might not have seen it, but definitely have heard about it, or these insects have definitely troubled you at some point of time. These are termites. You can see the structures that they make. So we call them Deemak in Hindi, and Deemak, as you know, they destroy our wooden furniture. Wherever they get lakdi, old lakdi, new lakdi, any type of wood, they'll start chewing this wood and they get nutrients from decaying wood. Now, they make their nests or they make their colonies underground. So the right hand side image, you see this line over here. This is the ground level. Their entire colony is below. You can see different sort of rooms. Some rooms where they'll keep their food, some rooms where the larvae stay, some rooms where they keep their eggs, etc. And all that we see above the ground, all this structure, nobody lives there. But you can see there are some hollow tubes, hollow pipes inside, and these actually pull in fresh oxygen for the termites to breathe here, because they don't have any fresh air. Without fresh air, they'll suffocate and they'll die. So they only make this structure so that they can breathe underground. And these structures, as you can see on the image on the left, can sometimes be 15, 20 feet tall as well. The termites in South America and Africa make the tallest termite mounds. But we have in India also, we have termites, which I have seen them making mounds which are 12 feet, 15 feet high. Now what they are doing is, if you imagine it in a way, fresh air coming in and stale air goes out from these holes on the side. So they actually have a centralized air conditioning system working. We found out centralized air conditioning probably 30, 40, 50 years ago. They have been using it for the last 200 million years. And our centralized air conditioning needs a lot of electricity. It generates a lot of bill. They don't need energy at all. They need a little bit of heating from the sun, so it's completely eco-friendly and it's completely environmental friendly. So we can actually, the old houses before air conditioning was invented actually used to copy the designs of these termites so that fresh air keeps on flowing. Unfortunately, we have lost this engineering technique, I think. And if we are to have a green future, a future where we don't destroy our planet, I think we have to go back to these designs and start replicating them once again. Okay, another insect, I'm sure everyone has seen this, everyone knows about this. These are honeybees, and honeybees we know are important because we get honey from them. We cannot make our own honey. There is no other animal, no other plant that can make honey. Only honeybees can give us honey. Now, honeybees, as you know, they visit flowers, they collect the nectar, and this nectar gets converted into the honey that we eat. But when they are visiting these flowers, they collect pollen grain. So this image on the right hand bottom corner, all these yellow dots, these are actually pollen grains that the honeybee has collected. When it visits the next flower, the pollen are deposited, and that is how flowers breed. That is how the fruit or the seed is formed. There are many cases, case studies in Europe, where since the 1980s and 1990s, because of the use of pesticides, honeybees disappeared. And when that happened, a lot of plants stopped producing fruits and stopped producing seeds because they were completely dependent. These plants were completely dependent on honeybees. In fact, it is today believed that about 80% of the fruits or plants that we consume are pollinated by honeybees. So you can imagine the disaster that would happen if honeybees disappear. 80% of our vegetarian food will go along with it, and that would definitely lead to a lot of people dying because of hunger. So another insect which is not just important from our point of view, just in the city or just in the forest, just in our country, but the survival of the entire human race. So as long as we are talking about insects which help human beings, there is one more tiny and very cute looking, very attractive looking insect. This is called a ladybug. They always come in these bright colors, red, orange, yellow. Now they're very tiny. They're probably smaller than your small fingernail. So this is not an actual photograph. It is a graphically generated, digitally created image. But this red insect is the ladybug. And all these tiny green insects on the grass blade, these are aphids. And aphids eat plants. Aphids keep on chewing grass, leaves, even bark and stems, and they destroy the plant. Many times you might have noticed your potted plants get these aphids, and they keep on eating the entire plant. The plant, we say, has got some sort of a disease. But in the fields, in the jungle, these ladybirds eat the aphids. So this is biological pesticide. It acts as a biological pesticide where you don't have to use any harmful chemicals, because when you use the harmful chemicals, it definitely kills the bad insects, but it also kills the good insects. And these chemicals, they remain on the plant. The plant sometimes absorbs it, and when we eat these vegetables, fruits, we are eating these chemicals which are even harmful for us. It's a poison. But if we have insects like these taking care of our plants, we don't have to use such harmful chemicals. We have been talking about how insects are helping us, but in the natural world, a lot of animals eat insects. A lot of spiders, birds, reptiles, lizards, a lot of them eat insects. Here you can see this is a bird called bee eater, and it is eating a dragonfly. So these insects form a base in the food chain on which a lot of animals are dependent. If all the insects disappear, if we continue a use of chemicals in high quantities and all these insects die out, imagine we are not just killing the insects, but we are also killing all these birds, all these small mammals, a lot of reptiles that are dependent on insects as their food source. Okay, this is a small a GIF. The video will keep on playing in loop, but I'll tell you what it is as it goes on. So this is an insect. It's a type of beetle called bombardier beetle, and it is called a bombardier beetle because it throws a bomb. Well, it is not actually a bomb, but it throws some sort of acid. So you can see from the rear end of the abdomen, you can see the spray coming out, and as soon as it comes out, it's so hot that there are a lot of vapors coming out. So if some sort of let's say a small cat or a rat or some other insectivorous animal comes and tries to eat this insect, immediately this insect will spray this acid into its mouth. It's in a very small quantity, so it will not cause you a lot of damage, but it will cause that burning sensation for a little while. The predator gets scared, runs away. But you can see this acid is also hitting the insect, but it has no effect on the insect at all. The insect is completely immune to this acid. So they have these anti-predatory strategies, some mechanisms to save themselves so wonderfully made that we can only imagine. Again, chemical warfare is something that we have learned from nature, from these insects. Finally, some insects which are very good at playing hide and seek with us. Like I said before, they are always around us. Many times we don't see them because they are small, but sometimes they are big and still we miss on seeing them because they are so wonderfully camouflaged. So this is a stick insect, and as you can see, it looks just like a stick. Uh, this is the main stick. You can see the insect on it. This is the body, and then the legs with which it is gripping. And then I have a zoomed in image. You can see that small button-like thing. That is the eye. You can see the eye over here as well. So the camouflage is so fantastic that it's difficult to see the insect, the stick insect, if it's steady, if it's not moving around. But what if there's wind? The leaves, the tiny twigs are moving, and if the stick insect stays steady, you might find it. So the stick insect, when it's walking, when there's wind, it will also keep on moving along with the wind, trying to fool you, trying to make you believe that there's actually a stick which is moving with the wind and not any insect over there. One more insect that is related to the stick insect and one of my most favorite insects of all time. This is called a leaf insect, and as you can see, it blends in. It just looks like a leaf. So very quickly to show you the body parts, the head is here. You can see these two eyes and two small antennae over here. These are the front legs. Again, the front legs have these outgrowths which look like leaves. The middle legs, the hind legs, and then the abdomen is again covered with, which almost looks like a leaf. They even have these veins on it. So the camouflage is so perfect, so up to the point that sometimes this insect is very close to you and you might just dismiss it for being a leaf if it's not moving around and not even realize that you are so close to something so incredible, such an amazing creation of nature. But that's what they want. They don't want you to realize that they are there, and they probably are doing it very perfectly. All right, so that is the end of the talk. I hope you all of you enjoyed, and I hope if there was someone who was afraid of insects, I've been able to take that fear out a little bit from you, and hopefully you start seeing these insects in a new light and start appreciating them more. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and Pankaj, I think if there are any questions, you can shoot them at me. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yes, Pranav, that was really an amazing session we have, and we have some amazing questions for you. Okay, so the first question is, why are spiders excluded from insects?
Okay, so as I mentioned at the beginning, in all the insects, all the 1 million species that we know, and probably the ones that we don't even know, it is important that they should have 6 legs. If there are more or less, it is not an insect, classification wise speaking. So spiders, as I mentioned, have 8 legs, and they have a different group for themselves called arachnids. So spiders are there. Even scorpions have 8 legs, and they also come in that group called arachnids.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next question is, how can a honeybee make a perfect hexagon in their honeycomb?
So honeybees, I am sure now they have been making these honeycombs for millions and millions of years, and probably way back they tried with different shapes. But if you look at the hexagon, it is easy to stack on each other using minimal amount of surface area and maximum use of the area inside. Circle is the perfect shape, but if you make a circle, it does not fit on one another. Hexagons, on the other hand, are very easy to stack, so they can have multiple cells on each other. They save a lot of space when they make these hexagonal scales. So it is trial and error, but they have found this one shape which now is perfect for them.
Okay, well, that's an amazing answer for that. And the last question we have is, when it comes to a termite mound, you said that there is a centralized air conditioning system which they have. But the question is, if only the air goes in, then what about the light? How can the termites see inside the home?
So termites are completely blind. Even when they come out, they are not actually dependent on their eyesight at all. The eyes are actually so small that they are almost useless for them. But they have their antenna, and they are dependent on the sense of touch and the sense of smell. So even if it's completely dark, the termites, they can find their way by touching the floor, by touching each other, and by the same technique that the ants use, leaving a chemical trail, so they know which way to go.
Okay, nice. And the one more last question for you. Okay, so the question is, how hot is a bombardier beetle's acid? I mean, if it falls on a human skin, will we feel anything?
So it is quite hot. Bombardier beetle, there are many different species, and I guess the chemical composition of the acid varies. So the temperature might also keep on varying. But I know of I have read somewhere that there is one insect which has 110 degrees Celsius. That's how hot it is. Now, for us, it is because these insects are tiny usually. So if they spray the acid, it's not enough to cause a lot of damage on the skin. It might cause a small blister, a small burn on our finger, on our hand. It will hurt, it will pain for a little while, but because it's not big, slowly your skin repairs itself, and it's not lethal for us.
Okay. Okay, so that's it. That's all the questions we had, Mr. Pranath. So,
Okay.
thanks a lot for such an amazing session. I hope now, if anyone is scared of insect from tomorrow onwards, everyone is taking a magnifying glass in their hands and start looking around what we have in our homes or in our backyards. So, once again, thanks a lot for taking this session for us. And this
My
session
pleasure.
will be soon going to be uploaded on YouTube. So, you can share it with your friends, hit the like button as well. Okay, so thanks a lot, Pranath.
Most welcome. Most welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you everyone for attending the session. We hope you guys had a lot of fun. Stay tuned for our upcoming next session. Thank you from us, Pranit sir. Sorry, I'm getting your name wrong. Sorry,
No,
Mr.
that's okay.
Patil.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me over. It was my pleasure completely.
Thank you so much, sir, for this amazing, wonderful session. We learned a lot of things today. Thank you so much. People, you can now exit the meeting. Thank you so much, sir, once again, and thank you everyone for doing this.